And if you're using a large language model, no matter how good it is, it's going to find the average. It's going to find the safe thing. An economic system that's pure capitalistic will eventually break down because the natural systems will not support it.
Stephan Clambaneva trained as a mechanical engineer. He spent 30 years in industrial design and product development through IBM, through Dassault Systems, and he now runs Park's US arm. He's also been the architect of IDSA's presence at NYC by Design since 2010. And we recorded this episode in New York during the week he helped build. Most leaders walk into a new role and start changing things. New structure, new people, proof they're doing something. Stephan tells them to do the opposite. Do nothing first.
So it's like a master's degree in design leadership and design management. I wanted to see for myself the content, the way it was delivered, so I could prepare to do the same.
He's mentored more than 75 startups, so I asked him the thing every founder gets wrong. What separates the founders who can hire well from those who keep getting it wrong?
More often than not, they're a founder or of a startup because they think they know what they're doing, and they think they're the best thing, they're the smartest person in the room.
Stephan said something that stuck with me. Design does not sit at the end of the process, making things look good. It sits at the front, where the expensive decisions get locked in. This is Why Design. All right then, Stephan, welcome to Why Design. And thank you for welcoming to your apartment for the week. We're in Williamsburg.
Williamsburg is across,
Yeah.
This is right next to Williamsburg Ridge on Delancey Street.
Yeah.
So kind of Lower East Side.
Awesome. So yeah, and it's NYC by Design Week as well. So it's very fitting that we're together to record this. So but yeah, we're recording, as I said, in New York, which is exactly where this conversation belongs. So for anyone that's listening that doesn't know who you are, then Stephan, perhaps you could introduce yourself.
Sure. So my name is Stephan Clambaneva. I talk about myself as being a creative hybrid. I'm not a pure anything, so I'm a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Mm-hmm. I was born in San Francisco. That's where I got my roots. I grew up in Athens, Greece. That's where I got my culture. Went to school, undergrad at Warwick in England. I got to work on a dune buggy for the Paris Dakar in France as an intern, and made my career and I guess created my design shops in New York City. So that's where I'm at. I mean, and it's great to have you here as part of New York Design Week.
No, it's great to be here. You've certainly travelled, haven't you? And throughout your career, worked for some of the best known brands in products and product development as well. We spent a long time at IBM, spent a long time at Dassault Systems as well.
Yes.
Your work today is with Park, with MD Park. And you describe yourself as a creative hybrid. What does that actually mean in hybrid? Sorry, in practice.
Yeah, well, good question. I mean, I get this all the time. Well, my undergrad is in mechanical engineering, right? Mm-hmm. But for me, it was always about the problem-solving process. And so the minute I figured out what I really wanted to do, I realized it was more about industrial design. Mm-hmm. So even though you could argue not formally trained in undergrad as an industrial designer, all my career working in product development is always about how to bring in design as early as possible into the product development process, because you're at the tip of the spear. So that's where the creative process is. That's where the decisions are being made in terms of materiality, in terms of how you make something. And if you don't do that right, then everything gets messed up downstream. Mm-hmm. So I learned that very early on in my time at IBM, where we were incorporating, formalizing, and industrializing, let's say, or operationalizing the industrial design process in the product development process to make sure that 80-20 rule that applies gets done properly, so that we don't have, those mistakes downstream. Mm-hmm. And even it sort of creates a full circle when it comes to sustainability, because that was the other part of me. So problem solving, but making sure that, we're leaving the earth better than it was when we found it. So, and I didn't want to go just into pure industrial design, just to make widgets for somebody. But I wanted to be able to have an impact on the decision-making process from early on.
Wonderful. Well, we'll get into that shortly, but we're sitting here in New York in Design Week. What does this week mean to you? After 15 years of being inside it.
Well, it wasn't. Industrial design, product design was not part of NYC by Design. Let's be honest. I'm being maybe a little overly critical, but IDSA, who I've been a part of, I was chapter chair for New York in 2010 to 2012. Then I was elected to the board of directors, and I spent another almost 15 years doing that. IDSA was not formally part of the organization or the committee for New York Design Week, which I thought was like ridiculous. And so back in almost 10 years ago now, I made a formal, kind of call out to the then CEO, managing executive director of IDSA, saying, "Guys, we got to do this." And I'm like, "Well, nobody's doing it, so I'll do it." So I stepped up, and so since then I've been on the committee for New York Design Week, representing IDSA.
Amazing.
And trying to make sure that IDSA, industrial design, and proper product development is properly represented every year during New York Design Week. And so that's whether it means making sure that the current chair gets properly connected to and gets ID properly represented during the week, whether it's doing events or getting speakers or content, so that we can proliferate and evangelize on the power of design. And specifically industrial design or product design, as it is in our case.
Yeah, it's my first time here. I missed it by a week last year when I visited New York, and but even at the opening party, it was full of industrial designers.
Absolutely.
Product. People from around the world come to this city, so it's remarkable, really. It doesn't feel. Also, there's lots of furniture design, there's lots of space design, there's cars, but is design, it's product design, is it? So
yeah. And I get, that's kind of my pet peeve a little bit. Is like, if we talk about we talk about product or furniture or interiors, what are they putting inside a house? It's all product design, for God's sakes. I mean, and 25 years ago, 30 years ago, there weren't 20 disciplines of design. It was architecture, industrial, and maybe a couple other disciplines. That was it, right? And now you have all these subdivisions. They've come from and they originate in industrial design. So, that's why I felt the need to kind of make sure that we were properly represented and the voice of true design and original design could be heard. Because IDSA, has its roots. I was wearing the pin, the 60-year anniversary pin from last night. IDSA's founding organization was based in New York City. So
here we are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. Well, let's do a quick scene set, before we get into some more of your work. What was the spark that put you on this path? If you could talk us through that in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, it's real simple. In fact, another person that you spoke to a little while back, Bob Schwartz.
Yeah.
So he was responsible for getting IDSA's IDEA awards in a magazine that was available on every newsstand around the world. So as a kid, I would open the magazine, and in the center would be all the cool designs that won the IDEA awards.
Awesome.
And I would wait for that issue, because that was what really got me going, right? So that's my, Kevin Bethune, another great industrial designer, talks in his TED Talk, talks about superpowers. I always often talk about, and I ask students or ask industrial designers, what's your origin story? Well, that's my origin story, looking at that. And then the other one is the IDEO shopping cart redesign. Like as a very young kid, you know, I worked in my dad's office. The things that I would do would always be about problem solving, like finding something that's not done right and why is that the way it is and how do we make it better? Or like every probably industrial designer, product designer that you've interviewed inherently will talk about Legos or something.
Yeah.
Right? So for me, it was about melting and bending Legos into parts that did not exist because I was trying to do something that I couldn't make with the stuff that I had.
Yeah.
Or you know, I had growing up in Europe, I had both for the Americans on the listening to this. I had my Matchbox or my Hot Wheel tracks.
Get those in Europe as well.
But I'd also have the German Dardas. I don't know if anybody knows what those are. They're slightly wider.
Yeah.
And the cars are, they're motorized. So you pull them back and they would go on the track. So my biggest thing was how can I integrate, just like my bicultural upbringing, I wanted to integrate my Hot Wheel tracks with the Darda's tracks. So any Germans on the call will or listening to this will probably know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember you telling me about that as well. And let me pause here for a moment. Most of the leaders on this podcast did not grow because they hired quickly. They grew because they hired well. The right senior engineer can accelerate a hardware roadmap by a year. The wrong one can stall it. At Codu, we help physical product teams make that hire with clarity and precision. If you're about to make a key design or engineering hire or thinking about your own next move, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Let's talk before you commit. I remember, obviously, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a designer. I'm fortunate enough to hang out with lots of really cool designers. But I remember as a kid myself, you know, taking apart the toy radio that I had. I think it was a Tomy radio with the cassette and taking it apart.
Cassette? What is that?
Because, well, yeah. Back in the 80s, we had these things called cassettes. So you had to rewind them with a pencil.
Exactly.
I'm a true millennial. But taking it apart, much to the annoyance of my parents when they found it. But then I used those parts and the motors in there to make other cool things.
Yeah.
I think, I'm not sure whether that's, there must still be a thing, but you're not taking apart an iPhone, are you? Things aren't take apart these days.
Yeah, maybe.
Anywho, so let's walk through the work that actually shapes you then, you know. Bay Area, France, so Park USA. Took us through some of those. You know, you walked into David Kelly's office at Stanford. You know, what did he teach you? What have you kind of carried on, kind of learning from that?
Well, you know, he just celebrated. There was a really nice celebration last year, the 20th anniversary of the Stanford D School. So I was lucky to be there, where they kind of did almost like a homage to all the things that were done. So I would say, for those that were lucky enough to attend that, and I was very humbled that I got the chance to do that. It shows you the sort of the depth and the impact that he's had on people. Much like myself. I mean, what I was struggling to decide is whether or not I, follow the path. I was thinking of trying to get into grad school at the time. I was still working in the Bay Area during the first internet boom. So I was doing CAD work and CNC machining for all sorts of clients, and we're getting to connect with those big IT firms in the Bay Area in the 90s.
Yeah.
And part of what he said is just try to figure out, try to be true to yourself and just go for it. Keep going. It's not going to be easy. Everybody has their own path, but just kind of keep moving forward. And it's like when I talk to students, it's like, try to define who you are. What's your process as a designer? And then if you get that story down, that's what people are going to be drawn to, right? Don't try to be like everybody else. Figure out who you are. Lean into your origin story, lean into your cultural backgrounds, lean into what makes you different. And that's, what I try to do.
Have there been any key moments where, you've heard his voice in your head. You know, you've had been kind of going down a different path, or things there's been a setback, and then you remembered that kind of those lessons. And
I'll tell you the one that even though I had a chance to meet him first, and I met I've been very lucky to meet a lot of, I mean, what we call the sort of the top of the top, the creme de la creme ID over the years. One of the folks that really probably impacted me even more than David, if you can believe it, was Bill Moggridge. So Bill, again, one of the co-founders of IDEO as well, but he started his third act as executive director for the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum right here in Manhattan. Not a lot of people know that there's a Smithsonian Design Museum in New York City, which you should all visit, by the way. But he came at the same time into that role as I was elected chapter chair for the New York chapter of IDSA. And he was amazing mentor for me. He was very open with his time, busy man, was super successful. You know, he could have been a diva, and he was a diva, but he never acted like one. He was very humble, down to earth, and he was very generous with his time with me. So he was the one that I would. He is the voice I would probably hear. You know, so he supported IDSA as a chapter. We did a bunch of wonderful collaborations together with the museum. They had the Wide Design Now biannual exhibit at the Cooper Hewitt, and he took a piece of that and showcased it at my inaugural design conference when I moved from the chapter chair role to the district vice president role on the board of directors for IDSA. So again, supporting with wonderful content the conference that I was putting together. So it elevated the event to a whole nother level. He didn't have to do any of that, you know, so it was amazing.
Oh, brilliant. But it's community collaboration, people coming together. One thing I love about the States as well, you know, we go to events like we did last night and the opening night, and design agencies, designers of kind of all colors and sizes, you know, different kind of and different disciplines come together, you know, and share ideas and best practice. Don't get that so much with the big agencies in the UK. There's a bit of standoffish. I might get some flack, you know, people listening to this, but certainly see it in the smaller ones, you know, the kind of 4 or 5 person kind of sources, but in the kind of the bigger teams, there's definitely us and them kind of vibe, and I love that about the States. Maybe that'd be a good export for us. But you know, talking about Europe, you've worked at French Design Studio. That was when you were at Dassault. You know, what did Europe teach you about kind of hardware design that the American scene perhaps didn't?
You know, that's a great question. We probably don't even have time we could just scratch the surface, but I'll give you a automotive perspective. Okay, so I was happy to work for a very very successful and like an icon of automotive design, French designer. So my former boss at Dassault was Anna Sensio. For those that don't know her, you know, she was responsible. You know, she's another one that got trained as a designer in Europe, but also got a degree in Detroit, and then worked for General Motors. So she was a Cadillac, and so what I learned from her, and kind of we picked up, is the difference between automotive design in Europe, historically anyway, and the U.S. And we've had these conversations many times. I mean, this is my perspective. You should double check with her on hers. But like you go into an interior in a European car, and it's awesome. You know, the materiality, the selection, the quality. You know, you're inside a luxurious, comfortable space. You come into a car, historically, again, because things have changed over the last 10, 15 years. But you'd go into a U.S. manufacturer's car, and you could tell right away that it was a U.S. car. I mean, soft, crappy, lower quality, I should say, not crappy, lower quality material selections. Not a big emphasis on the aesthetic side, but more on the, let's just make it so it works kind of a thing. And again, this is my personal opinion, right? And I work with a lot of automotive designers on various different projects over the years. Is that you have this different. They come from different places. In the States, you had the rugged, trying to get from the East Coast to the West Coast. They got on these carriages. It was about making sure it can get from the East Coast to the West Coast. So super simple, bare bones. It had to work. Whereas in Europe, we had people being, like royalty being carried around in these beautifully ornate boxes with plush, fancy materials, wonderful wood, carved, maybe even bedazzled or gold inlays, all sorts of fancy stuff. So that sort of evolved into the interiors that we had in Europe, whereas here it's about making sure it didn't break down. So that's the thing that I kind of really loved about the differences between Europe and here. That's just one example.
Yeah, I guess the gap has tightened over recent years. But yeah, really interesting. Well, let's talk about NYC by design. And you've been the architect of the IDSA's NYC by design president since 2010, I believe. So take me back to when it first started, and the pushback, I guess, if there was any, or kind of how you got that over the line.
Well, to be perfectly honest, NYC by Design was formed, I think, 12 years ago. So before then, we had what we called ICFF. So it's the International Contemporary Furniture Fair, right? And around there, it was very much independent, but everybody did their thing. And it was, again, rallied around this central, just like the Salone in Milan. And we do our own thing. We do events, right? So what we did back in those days, and I just carried on the torch. I wasn't the one that started it, but IDSA would curate their own booth. So IDSA New York was responsible for selecting, putting out a call for paper for interest from our local design community to exhibit at ICFF, because it's prohibitively expensive for independent or emerging designers. So as IDSA New York, we would get a space and say, hey, we don't know how big it's going to be, but we're going to curate it and see how many people are interested. And we build a design booth for IDSA at the ICFF. I did that 3 years. It's a lot of work. It's another job, So we did a call out. We'd get people responding. We'd select, we'd curate, and we'd create the branding. The one that I did, I can tell you, we did it, I think, 6 years in a row. I was involved in 3 of them. The biggest one I was involved with that I led was 150 linear feet, or 50 meters long. It was huge. So we had 10, 12 designers from, now at this point, it was all around the United States, shipping sofas and chairs and all sorts of stuff. And now, fast forward to 20 onwards, I see the guys that started off in those little IDSA booths for a couple grand because that's what they could afford. Now they have their own booth because they're their own brand. They're successful. They've grown. So that's the little thing that I've been able to sort of help with when it comes to community. So I wasn't alone. We had a huge team working together. At the time, we also, in some cases, I can talk about collaborative design. We had a section for furniture design for IDSA. So I said, why aren't they involved? So they came in and they supported it a couple of years when I was running it. And again, then as we evolved and as the Economic Development Corp, EDC of New York, kind of thought, because it's their idea, they came up with the branding and everything for NYC by Design. They're the ones that really got it off the ground as a brand, as a separate entity, right? And we've been collaborating with the folks that were doing that, and especially, and I got a chance to see Ed Hogigian, who was part of EDC that really spearheaded the beginning of this. And then it's transitioned and it's grown. Every year it's gotten bigger and better. And that's where, again, even though I was no longer chapter chair, and I did, I had other roles as on the board of directors for IDSA. I still wanted to make sure that whoever was locally the representatives was connected to NYC by Design. So making sure that we kept those connections going, build the relationships with the local community to get space, to leverage space, because that's one of the most expensive things here in New York.
Yeah.
And make sure that we provided content and great opportunities for folks to meet, just like yourself,
Yeah. No, it's awesome. And talk us through the X bracelet. Can you tell me about that?
Oh, yeah.
What about so?
Yeah. So again, just an example of purpose-driven design. So I'm very much, again, I have a very different past. I didn't go work for a small, as a pure industrial designer, making stuff for somebody else. From the very beginning, I was always interested in really, I'm not going to make something just for the sake of making it. But last year, as part of NYC by Design, they decided to do an exhibition and did a call out for local designers to create a souvenir of what they thought should be representative of New York. It's very broad. And I was inspired by something that had happened the year before, where we were celebrating New York Design Week. We were in some fancy event, and there was security at the door, and I recognized one of the participants and one of the committee members of NYC by Design. And they were at the door, and the front, the security guy was giving her a hard time because they didn't know who she was, and maybe she had an RSVP, but she was on the committee. She's put in hundreds and hundreds of work hours to help this event, right? And I thought if we had some identifier that could show that who they were, the fact that they were part of the team, then it would be easy. So instead of putting a lapel pin or something, I was thinking, how about a piece of jewelry? So a piece of unisex, anybody could wear it, kind of a thing. So that's where the X bracelet came out of. It was it started off as a piece of jewelry. The idea was, version 2 would have a RFID chip embedded at the back where you could download all the events. So instead of having to find your the QR code or the event or whatever, you could just swipe your badge, and everybody would walk around, and the folks that were part of the committee that are doing stuff, if they want to go to an event, they should just be able to go. So it's about experience design tied to something real, a real product. So that was where it came from, and that's what it evolved in. I got to exhibit it as part of the exhibit down at the World Trade Center at the Calatrava building, the I, you've heard of. And it was in a collaboration with Kickerland, who's one of the sponsors. And, it's a great event. 70 or 69 other designers got to promote and showcase their souvenirs and what represented New York City for them. And we had all sorts of stuff, from games and pieces of jewelry like mine to vases and all sorts of stuff. It was a lot of fun.
How many apples? How many Statue of Liberties?
Yeah, all sorts of absolutely. All that and more.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah,
amazing. And your handling of the chair role is over now, isn't it? It's been a few years. So you're no longer chair. But what does the next 10 years of NYC by Design need to look like, in your opinion? And what is the new generation getting right or wrong? Maybe slightly controversial to ask you that on camera.
No, listen, controversial is, listen, what we need to be doing is we need to make sure that we don't leave it up to AI to solve all of our problems. So I think we're going to come, the younger generation shouldn't just phone it in, as we say. That's probably an out of date reference as it is, or chat GPT it, or, they should make sure that they do the work, because that's what design is about. And if you're using a large language model, no matter how good it is, it's going to find the average. It's going to find the safe thing. So, in fact, I can tell you specifically a reference to something that we just had a really interesting conversation. So we talked about founders of IDEO, the current managing director of IDEO, Mike. I met in Athens, Greece, of course, of all places, at a forum that I was at, and I was speaking at, called the House of Beautiful Business. So, and the topic was AI, and so the conversation was exactly that. Because of large language models it's all about the data, right? They're going to find sort of the average of averages. So if you look at it as a curve, so a little bit of geeky mathematics at this point, right? So it's about AI is going to be in the middle. So the bell curve is here. It's going to probably be within that space. But as designers, what we want to be working for and designing for are the folks outside. So the outliers. So if we're talking about inclusive design, it's never the people in the middle. It's about the outliers, right? And so that's what we want to be working for in terms of solutions as well, right? So that's where AI does not do a good job right now, right? Because they can't. It's not in the model. It's not there. So as designers, we need to make sure that the younger generation doesn't phone it in, doesn't prompt it, but actually does the work themselves. So that's what I would think we should do. So in terms of a design, the other thing that I think we should do is do a better job of collaboration. Yes, we're doing better than we did, but we still got a long ways to go. I mean, I just wrote a paper about how we've been maybe integrating artificial systems versus natural systems. They can't work independently anymore. So that's where my sustainability kind of focus comes into play. Because if we're talking about continuing to just think of, capitalism rules and it's about the mighty dollar or continuous growth, and let's see how many widgets we can make, and let's help as industrial designers, how many thousands of widgets and products can we make as cheaply as possible. That's the wrong thing we should be doing. Okay, so we should be thinking about how to work within the real systems, so that you can't have constant growth. It just doesn't work. An economic system that's pure capitalistic will eventually break down because the natural systems will not support it, right? So we need to be integrating those things together, whether it's systems thinking like Donella Meadows talks about, to a model-based systems engineering, like a pure mechanical engineer would understand. Those systems have to be working together, and then they have to be working within the natural systems of the world, right? So that's what I'd love to be able to see more of. So it's not just about quarter or year-over-year growth. It's about, and in fact, I summarize it well by saying we need to move away from people, planet, profit, which is something that we talk about, to people, planet, prosperity. So it's not about profit. You have to be profitable, otherwise you'll go out of business. But you don't have to make 100 million% profit. If you can be prosperous, it might even be a better metric.
Yeah. I was speaking to Bill Lau for the podcast, and he's part of the Founders Club, where you give away money. He says you'll never be a billionaire. And at the Founders Club, it's like, no one needs to be a billionaire. You be a multi-millionaire, and do really good stuff, but just give it away. You can still be very profitable. You can still be very prosperous. What are you going to do with this? $1 billion. Okay. Well, look. Let's talk about people. Building a team is part that most people get wrong at some stage in the journey. You've seen this from inside Park and from outside, from across more than 30 years for clients. We haven't got like loads of time here. You know, talk me through kind of what does it look like when it goes wrong? You know, when you're scaling businesses, just talk about kind of people and prosperity there.
Hmm.
Yeah, perhaps give us some insights as to what you've seen where it just breaks.
Well, yeah, I have been. It doesn't feel like that. I still feel like a young kid, but yeah, I guess it's close to 30 years now. In working, you you tend to see the cycles in businesses. So we're talking about we're definitely at an inflection point. The last time I talked about an inflection point was with AR. I mean, excluding pandemic. Okay, that's a whole nother conversation. But if we take that out of the picture, from a technological perspective, the sort of XR conversation was the last inflection point where we were actually doing a lot of research, primary and secondary research when it comes to how augmented reality can change the product development process, right? But we see cycles. So I've been around long enough to see, these cycles typically were 3-4 years. So the team centralizes. Oh, let's get everybody together under one group, under one leader, and let's try to connect and work together. And then, after a while that gets old and they're like, oh, let's decentralize. Let's have spoke and wheel models and we'll have a central place, but then we'll embed design and all the different disciplines or all the different departments or all the different brands, depending on the industry, right? FMCG, it's very brand oriented, right? So they'll have a design lead in each of the brands, and then there'll be a central person, and then 4 years later, that didn't really work that well. Let's centralize. So I've seen, so this is what typically happens. What I'm seeing now is a lot of just spinning, like, the screen where the wheel is just spinning. People are just, it's just, I don't know what they're waiting for. I'm seeing a lot of, we need to reorganize. Well, it didn't, it's like reorg after reorg in some cases. So it's very frustrating to see because you're seeing, it's like a lot of busy work, but it's not efficient. People can't sort of focus on the work that they need to do, the craft, and they're just spending time normalizing after change. So there's a lot of that these days. That's what I'm seeing a lot of. But I see, what I like to see in well managed teams. Well, you have this split between people, processes, and the content or the craft itself, right? And we need to have balance in those things. If we keep reorganizing, you can't build a team, right? And if you keep changing leadership, again, you can't lead. You're just going through the motion. But people are, again, if you're going to be, as a leader, you need to be able to inspire. You need to be able to show vision and show direction and get people behind you to kind of move forward. If it's constantly kind of a rotation, there's no way to really build that momentum, I find. So what I like to see and what I tell a lot of our, the folks that I get a chance to talk to is if you're taking on a new role, the easiest thing to do is to make a bunch of changes. What I would say is just wait a little bit, take a pause, get to know the organization. If you can afford it, go out to everyone, meet everybody in your team, meet your stakeholders, figure out who is the real power, who has the real power in the organization, right? And then start to make change. In fact, we talked about it, and it's totally okay. I'll call out Dante. Dante is the current executive director for IDSA. That's what I told him. I said the easiest thing to do is to make a bunch of changes, fire a bunch of people, bring in a bunch of new people, change things up. But I would say hold back if you can, as much as you can, to sort of figure out, get yourself comfortable with the organization, with the people first. But that, I don't see that. It happens almost never. Like a CEO comes into some company And because that's the easiest way to show that they're making something, they're doing something, is to just switch this out.
Yeah.
Move people around, whereas the hard thing to do was just to figure out what's the real DNA? Who are the people that are really making a difference, right?
Before we dive back in, this one is for founders and CEOs building physical products. If you're thinking about hiring a VP of product, chief product officer, or head of R&D, this is not just another hire. It defines how your roadmap is set, how your teams are built, and how your company competes. At Codu, we specialize in securing senior product and engineering leaders for hardware businesses entering their next stage of growth. Focused, discreet, high consequence. If that decision is on your horizon, find me, Chris White, on LinkedIn, and let's talk it through. So you've mentored, if I got this right, more than 75 startups?
I haven't counted them, but definitely more than a couple dozen. That's for sure.
There's a few, more than most.
Yeah.
What separates the founders who can hire well from those who keep getting it wrong?
So the biggest challenge I find with founders, I mean, listen, hiring well is a great question. That's where they have experts like you to do it. Okay. What I tell them is more often than not, they're the founder or of a startup because they think they know what they're doing, and they think they're the best thing. They're the smartest person in the room, right? And that may all be true. But I tell them, I'm sure that you would hire somebody and you would tell me, you wouldn't tell them, but you'd probably tell me that I could probably do their job better than they can. And again, that might be true too. But what I tell them is the thing that you have to realize is that you can't do everything as the founder of a startup. You have to learn to delegate. And yeah, you probably might be able to do everybody's job better than they would. That's not the point. The point is you have to focus on, the mission critical stuff that's important for the growth of the business. And the hardest thing for these folks is to let go of power. So learn to delegate is probably the best thing that they could do. Yeah.
I read a book. Called Buy Back Your Time. I can't remember who the author is, but it's a pretty famous book. And the one line that keeps coming back from that is, if you can find someone that can do something 80% as well as you, that's awesome.
That's golden.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had one of the first good leaders, managers, bosses for me was, again, this is going to show you my origin story beyond the Legos and the Hot Wheels. So fresh out of college, I knew I wanted to do industrial design. I had an undergrad degree in mechanical engineering, even though we did a bunch of stuff. I worked for, again, during the first internet boom, we were making, I was 20, 21, 22 years old. I was making $80K a year. It's crazy. I mean, I was like making good money back then, and it's not a brag. I mean, I'll be brutally honest, but what I was telling, why I mentioned the numbers, because it's like everybody was making money. It's not like I was making money. Everybody in Silicon Valley during the 90s were making tons of money, right? But we were doing really, really cool work for CAD work and industrial design and sketching. I was working with tools that industrial, if you talk to any older industrial designers, the hands down best creative tool for basic CAD was Ashlar Vellum. I don't know if anybody knows what that is. The really older guys will know. They will chuckle probably when they're listening to this. But why do I mention all that? Is because the story that the guy that I work for, his name is Bill Murtaugh. He said about startups is, imagine this visual. You're running a company, and in order to not to succeed. The analogy is you're running as fast as you can. There's this huge monster chasing you. And the only way to not be eaten by this monster is just to throw back money over your back behind you. Hopefully that they will scoop up and pick it up and delay eating you. So that's the visual that he would tell me about when it comes to managing a business or a startup. So that's the analogy, that's the story and that's the picture that I will share with the rest of the world. That's what he told me.
I love it. I love it. If a hardware founder listening, as I'm going to scrap that question because I'm going to ask you about the Park Academy, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah.
So you built the Park Academy because universities, they're not, and business in general aren't turning out design leaders. Most managers, most leaders are accidental. What's the specific gap that you're seeing, and why do you think nobody else has closed it?
Well, I mean, whether it's Park or whether it's my own sort of experience over the years, what we found, and I mean, I'm somebody that's gotten a graduate degree in management, so I've managed to sort of bridge the gaps artificially by filling in those pieces of education that I didn't have professionally. I also, when I first joined Park, I followed and participated in the full program. So 40 weeks of training, right? So it's like a master's degree in design leadership and design management. I wanted to see for myself the content, the way it was delivered, so I could prepare to do the same, right? So as a result, what we found is, and I think we're talking about as we're getting after our burger, people that are successful have a lot of these innate characteristics of a good leader or of a good manager. What they haven't done is they haven't had an opportunity to really hone the skills unless they're just doing it on the job. So they're learning as they do it. So what they might have picked up, first of all, they don't know what gaps they have, and they don't know what they're good at because nobody's told them. They're just doing stuff, and hopefully, as they're doing it, that something works, something doesn't work. So a lot of things that we do is we actively identify as they're going through the programs. We identify and try to make sure that they're aware of these things. Identify the things that they're good at, identify the gaps, and then try to help them figure out how to best, lean into the skills that they do have consciously, and then fill in with proper education and training the gaps that they don't. And we're not going to tell them that, learning a topic or teaching a topic in 4 hours, which is typically the length of one of our modules, right, or topics that we cover, is going to be, you're going to get all that you need. But we're going to identify levels of things that you can pick up, and you can just keep going back and digging deeper and deeper. At the end, we always provide a long reading list of additional materials because there's at least 10 to 15 books on lists that we provide that they should be going or reading about, right? And it's just giving them the tools, because at that level, the level that they're at, they're already successful. Now it's how to be actively and realizing what to do, what they need to be doing, and again, like I said, I'll end with the fact that, and re-emphasize the fact that consciously leading and then consciously knowing when you need to switch from leading to managing. So putting on that separate hat, or maybe if you're lucky enough to just be the leader because you have 300 or 1,000 person organization where you're the leader, you're the one that's going to have to motivate and inspire, right? And then you have good managers that can operationalize, drive towards design excellence in the organization. But you need, if you don't have that luxury, you often have to wear both hats.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to consciously know when to switch between the two. Right? And that's not something that comes easily.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that. I'm much more comfortable when I've got my leader hat on,
Mm.
you know, and looking big picture, like where are we taking the business? What are we doing? You know, where are we going? What we're doing with the community, that sort of things. But when it comes to the operational management side, I'm not so good because I'm not disciplined enough to be all over the KPIs, or we've got to do this, and this today in this order. But it has to be done in a small business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's another good point, Chris. I mean, again, identifying what you're good at and what you're not good at, so that you can find the right team and balance to complement your skills and your strengths, right? And if you don't want to do that, or if you know that you're not good at it, find somebody that is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's why, you know, from my side, a lot of the smaller teams, the startups that I work with, you know, they will say we need self-starters. And it's because the founders, the leaders within the business, they're like me in some respects, they're not so strong or confident when it comes to the actual task management and management side. But yeah, interesting. And so looking forward, what's the next big bet that you're making right now? And why do you believe it'll pay off?
Well, I think it's sort of like I would say it's believing in the fact, in the DNA of sort of who I am, sort of this hybrid where we need to have the ability to be good at the craft. That's a no-brainer. That's a starting point. If you don't have that, then you're dead in the water. But you have to be able to talk about and measure the value of design, the impact of design to non-designers. Okay, and you need to be able to tie it through to the additional aspects of stuff that we don't talk about historically, which is the sustainability side of things. So, and we have to go beyond that. We have to go to, how can we build every product into something that's completely circular, or make it as circular as possible? You're not going to be able to make a car that has zero carbon footprint. It's just not possible because you're making real stuff. It's tough. You're never going to get to zero. Okay. But we need support from, local government and big institutions to be able to operate at scale, to change those existing business models. And we need structural change in our economies. We need to be able to kind of combine those things together. So, you can't operate outside of the norm. I talked about it before, but I think that's what we need to be focusing in on. So design can lead the way because we're experts at what we do is we solve problems. You could argue everybody solves problems in every discipline, but we're professionals. This is our professional job, solving problems. That's all we do. Mm-hmm. Okay, so and we're at the tip of the spear, where everything starts. Front end innovation, design, industrial design, right? That's the point where, and this is, not me saying it, it's decades of research in academic institutions across the world, whether it's the UK or whether it's Berkeley by Professor Agogino. I think I first referenced her in a paper I wrote in 1999 about, how you have to educate designers on environmental issues, 80% of the costs, 80% of the impact of the environment is determined in the initial 20% of the product development process. That's a direct quote from her, right? That's where design lives. That's where innovation lives. So if we're not using sustainable materials, the process is going to be, it's not going to be a sustainable product from the very beginning. If you don't know the impact that your manufacturing process has on the environment, then you're locking in a manufacturing process that's going to create a product that's not sustainable. It's not circular. So we need to educate the designers, the innovators, the folks that are at the front end of the process to be green from the very beginning. And again, we got to be able to give them the financial tools to be able to show that it's not going to be more expensive. Yes, it might be harder. the process might be a little more complicated because a reverse supply chain is not easy, but you have to convince and you have to be able to know and teach them how to be able to communicate the value of design and the impact that your selection process is at the front end and what it can do at the end, because that's one of the things I'm trying to do. In fact, I'll do a little plug. One of the things I'm trying to do, again, just to be a little aspirational, is I'm working on a debate that I want to set up at a conference, and it might be IDC in the fall, where we can debate on sustainability. So like an old-fashioned debate. We'll split the room down the middle. We'll have one group on the left, one group on the right. Standard debate rules apply. And let's debate how to talk about sustainability with your colleagues, what people should be saying, and what are the standard responses, oh, greenwashing, oh, it's too expensive, oh, it's not real, it's fake, or they're just as whatever you think you're telling me is just as dirty as anything else, right? And how do we counter those things? Because there's a way to talk about this, and we have to work as hard as we can, especially in this current environment, that we can convince people of what the right thing to do is. And I think design can lead the way.
It's interesting. In the wide design community chat we've had, that's come up quite a lot recently. Design agencies promoting sustainable materials, alternative materials to plastics, like sea plastic and that kind of thing. But there's, once you look at the cost to the material currently, they almost immediately get pushed back to plastic. And I think a lot of that is obviously budgets, but maybe the leadership of the clients or big organizations aren't on board because it affects the bottom line.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. What is the bottom line? So that's where, again, we did a proper activity-based costing analysis of where true costs are for a particular product. Some of them are outside of their value chain. So yeah, it could be true. It could be marginally more expensive, but because they don't currently have to pay to recycle that material, it's free for them. It's not really free. So unless, it's like the true cost of everything, right? If you break it down, what are you measuring? If it's inside the current system. So that's the thing that we need to educate people about, is that, yeah, you're not paying for it, but it's also something that you could be using if you turned your business model into something circular. You could have access to raw material if you were to take it back. You would be maybe getting something for free. It's not free either, but you're not paying for it. If you were to be able to turn it back into a reverse supply chain where you're getting that material back into your operations, right? So it's about educating the client, and it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but that's where we have to do our due diligence to be able to communicate. Have you thought of this, Mr. Customer? Have you considered the alternative? Do you remember what happened when, and then come up with an example? And there's tons of these. When you wanted to make 100,000 units of such and such, and you couldn't get the product. The material, you couldn't make it because you didn't have enough material. What if you could reduce that volatility? What if you could reduce that risk? Then they're like, oh, wait, maybe it's worth paying a couple extra cents for that different material if I have a guaranteed supply stream of material that I know can at any point I can rely on. So again, it's just one small example. We're not going to solve all these problems today, but it's about educating the clients and pushing back on the brief sometimes. Have you considered? And this is where the bigger challenge comes with a client. Is I've been on the agency side. I am on the agency side, arguably, But if you're speccing out, if you're responding to a brief or an RFP where the brief isn't, you're just another vendor. What if you were to make the work, do the work to be more integrated into the product development process, more as a partner as opposed to just another vendor? Then you lower your own personal risk because you're more actively part of the process. Maybe you can have an impact on the decisions that are being made. So the brief actually is better than the first one you got. And then the relationship you have with the client is better because you're not trying to respond to an RFP, but now you're part of the product development process where you're a secured partner for the long run and not just trying to find the next gig.
Brilliant. Let's end with some quickfire questions.
Sure.
So I'm just going to throw these at you. Try your best to just come up with the first thing that comes to mind. Okay. Number one, the fastest way for a design leader to lose the boardroom is?
Look how cool I am. No, I mean, seriously, they this is the thing is that let me tell you something, some esoteric story about how design is the best thing since sliced bread. Yeah, that doesn't work.
We had Bob Schwartz on the show this week to exactly that. But it's true. It's true. One book every hardware founder should read this year.
Hardware.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a good one. I would say I would go back to the book about purpose-driven sort of. I mean, it's not design, but it's the Dutch. Oh, I'm drawing a blank now. It's about how to make sure that you design you're purposely so selecting stuff and you're making tough choices as opposed to just the obvious ones. But maybe just go back to something else simple. The Cat Holmes, it's not a new book. It's something old, but it's about inclusive design. I forget the title, but if you look at Cat Holmes's book, in fact, I was just referencing it in one of my paper I wrote recently. So she does a good job of showing how we should be designing for everybody, not just sort of middle of the road,
I haven't got Wi-Fi on here. We'll add it to the show notes.
Yeah.
Oh
wait, maybe hold on. We can do it.
There we go.
Yeah, because Bergman is the other guy's book that I was referring to, and it's so funny that I draw a blank. I draw a blank on both of them. So let's see. So the first book I was thinking was Rutger Bergman, Moral Ambition. So it's about kind of selecting, like going for broke, going for complicated projects and stuff, not just simple stuff, So I think for hardware, like go to the stuff that's really going to have an impact long term. And then the other book, hold on a second. It's Cat Holmes. So let me see. That's cool. I like that. I like her book a lot. So Cat Holmes. She's the here we go. It's called Mismatch. So one book I think could be that hardware folks could take a look at is Cat Holmes' book called Mismatch.
Yeah. How
to bring in inclusive design into the work that they do.
Amazing. Goes back to the bell curve as well. We talked about it. A skill young industrial designers undervalue right now.
Sketching.
Say more. I believe about sustainability, you've changed your mind, how?
Sustainability. That it's always more expensive. Yeah. That's definitely not the case.
Bro. And your default move when a client brief lands and something feels off.
Why? I question the brief.
Yeah.
Where did this come from? what's the reason this is in there? Try to get to the root cause. So do a root cause analysis to figure out where this is coming from, because there's probably some invisible power at play here that we don't know about. So try to get to the root of what's the reason why. If it feels a little wrong, there's probably something that we don't know about.
Yeah, definitely worth trusting your gut in those instances. So, all right, well, to wrap up, for anyone that wants to follow your work, or just get into your orbit, where's the best place to find you?
I'm very consistent. It's been around for probably 30 years. All my handles are all the same. It's Clambanet, so it's sort of a play on my last name, but everything to do with the internet or the network is that. So you can find me there on Twitter and Instagram, and then obviously LinkedIn is just by my first and last name.
I'm going to ask one bonus question, I suppose, for any young designers listening, that want to plug into the New York design community. Where should they actually start?
IDSA.org.
Great answer. Stephan, thank you so much for being on Why Design. Glad we finally made it here. Yeah, been great chatting to you.
Same here.
Thanks for listening to Why Design. If this episode gave you some new ideas, share it with someone in your team who'd find it useful. And follow the show so you don't miss what's next. And if you're building a product team or looking for your next challenge in design or engineering, that's exactly what we do at Codu. We help companies hire smarter and faster and help great talent find work that actually fits. I'm Chris White. Connect with me on LinkedIn and let's keep raising the bar for design leadership. Until next time, stay curious, stay creative, and keep asking, why design?